everybody today. I noticed Sister Amy wasn't here. Keep her in your prayers. She's not feeling good. So keep her in your prayers. Listen, the title of my sermon this afternoon is X-Ray Vision. X-Ray Vision. X-ray vision. The word X-ray means that certain lights can't penetrate through certain things, but X-rays can penetrate through things that regular light can't. Amen? I know my sister lost an uncle on Tuesday. My condolences to her also. You know, the only comfort in losing a loved one is that we will see them again. Amen? And then they'll never leave, and we'll really get tired of them, and we're like, oh man, they're never going to leave. So, X-ray vision. There's the book of Samuel, chapter 16, verse 7 says, "For the Lord does not see as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Now here, God is telling that to Samuel as Samuel is looking for David. The Lord doesn't see as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Another way to put that is, you may look at somebody and say, man, I bet you he's really strong, and yet he's really weak. You say, oh man, that person must be really weak, and yet, you know, they're really strong. Or you may see maybe a couple and say, oh, that must be, you know, they must be a really good couple, because you're looking at the outward. But on the inside, you know, it ain't that good. So you have to, God is saying, be careful to look at the outside, but look as God looks and look towards the inside. So that's God talking to Samuel, who's looking for David. Now let's go to 1 Chronicles chapter 28. And I want to paint a picture here, and I hope I could deliver it the way that God gave it to me, because it's really interesting how it goes. 1 Chronicles chapter 28. Almost there. 1 Chronicles chapter 28 verse 9 says, "As for you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father and serve him with a loyal heart and with a willing mind, for the Lord searches all hearts and understands all the intent of the thoughts. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will cast you off forever." Verse 10, "Consider now, for the Lord has chosen you to build the house for the sanctuary. Be strong and do it." Now, that is God then talking to Solomon, who is David's son. So first he talks to the dad about looking at the inside, and then he talks to the son and tells the son, look, and he goes a step further and says, serve him with a loyal heart and with a willing mind, for the Lord searches all hearts and understands all the intent of the thoughts. Let me go to one more verse here. Jeremiah 17:9. Jeremiah 17:9. Now check this out. Jeremiah chapter 17 verse 9 and 10 says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?" 10. "I, the Lord, search the heart. I test the mind, even to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his doing." 10 says, "I, the Lord, search the heart. I test the mind." Now let's do a little bit of homework here. Let's do a little bit of research. Let's dig a little deeper into what's being said here. Now, the mind in this particular passage means the most secret parts. The most secret parts. It says, "I, the Lord, search the heart and the most secret parts." Now, the heart and the mind are two different things. And he's saying, I search them both, and I sift through them both, and I know them both. But here we want to talk about the mind and not the heart. He says, I test the mind, or I test the most secret parts. God knows the most secret parts. God knows what's inside of you. God knows what you're thinking, what your intentions are. He knows your past, your present, and your future. God doesn't look at us as a beginning and an end. He looks at us as a whole. God can look at you and think of you as a baby, as an adolescent, as a teenager, as a young man, as an old man, and God just looks at you as the whole. But here he says, I test the most secret parts. Now, the mind in the Hebrew means kidneys. Means kidneys. Now, the word kidneys in the English translation is one of pair of organs in the body that separate waste matter from the blood and passes it off through the bladder as urine. So in the Hebrew, he says, I test your kidneys. I test your kidneys. The kidneys separate the good from the bad. Your inner parts is where you separate the good from the bad. Now God is saying kidneys are special to the Jewish people. They take the kidneys and they sacrifice them. They take the kidneys of the animal and the fat of the animal and they sacrifice them. But the kidneys mean something special. So when you read it in English, it tends to be more random. It tends to be more wider. But when you read it in the Hebrew, it gets more defined. He begins to paint more of a perfect picture where he says, you know what? I test your kidneys. And your kidneys are inside. Your kidneys are deep inside of you. And the way the body works is the kidneys are like a filter. It filters your blood. You can't live without kidneys. It filters your blood. And it separates the waste, and it puts the waste into your bladder, and then it separates it from your body. Now, is what God is saying here. He's like, I test your kidneys, or I test your innermost parts, or I test the thing that's inside of you that separates the good from the bad. Oh, come on, follow me now. I'm watching you inside separate the good from the bad. Now God said, don't look at the outer parts of the man like men do, but look at the inner parts of a man like I do. Because it's what God does is he goes inside of you where that place inside of you that you don't talk about, you don't share about, you don't discuss, you don't open up, you keep it quiet, you keep it way deep hidden inside of you. And that's where you make the decisions of what's good and what's bad. That's where you make the decision of what you're going to keep and what you're going to let go. What you're going to have fester inside of you or what you're going to release from inside of you. That's what God is testing. That's what God is looking for. The inner parts is what God is watching you as you separate the good from the bad. God looks at you with X-ray vision. He's looking deep to the inner man, deep inside of you. Now is what they would do with some sacrifices is they would just cut the sacrifice all the way open in front, but they wouldn't cut them in half. They just cut the front, and then they would open them up so that their inner parts were exposed. Now, if you get into like Deuteronomy or you get into Leviticus, God begins to talk about how to sacrifice and what to do with the body parts and what to do with the blood and what to do with the insides of the animal from the intestines and the organs, and they sprinkle the blood on the horns of the altar. It's really pretty gruesome. It's like a horror movie. And so, but God is saying this really makes sense now. You think of, well, what does animal sacrifice have to do with my walk with God now? Or what do the parts of the animal have to do? Because we don't do them things anymore. But it's still relevant today. It's still relevant today. Now, you got to understand the Hebrew. You got to understand the sacrifice. You got to understand the parts of the animal to understand that when God says, I test your mind, it's just like, okay, well, God tests my mind. It's so much deeper than that, because God is saying, listen here, now you can fool them, but you can't fool me. God is, you ever walked up to someone and say, hey, man, how you doing? They're like, I'm doing good. And they're dying inside. How you doing, man? How's everything going? Everything's fine. Everything's okay. Everybody's good. But really, they're dying inside. But if you could look at them with X-ray vision, you can see them and say, you know what? Something's wrong. Something deep inside of you is wrong. Something that you're wrestling with. Something that you're having issues with, or you're having problems with. And God really, really looks deep inside of you, past the outward appearance, past the gestures, past even the physical part, because you can say the right thing and do the right thing and be in the right place, but God isn't looking at what you're doing. God isn't looking at what you're saying or where you're going. God is looking at the deep parts of your innermost self, where you are sifting through what is good and what is bad. Let me give you an example. There was an old preacher. He was in his early 90s. He was in his early 90s, and he was preaching a sermon. He says, "Let me tell you." So he's talking to the young man. He was talking about pornography. He tells the young man, "Don't be looking at pornography because the enemy will use it against you later in life." He said, "When I was 13 years old," he said, "I saw a picture that I shouldn't have seen." And he says, to this day, now he's in his early 90s, and to this day, it's just as fresh in my mind as it was 70-some years ago. Because deep inside of the inner parts, there are things that get caught. There are things that get clogged. There are things that get stuck to inside of us, and we may never mention it again. We may never say it again. We may never tell anybody ever about it. But that is where God is watching you the most. Because just like your kidneys, as you begin to let the bad things in, you begin to let bad things go through the blood. Now it's funny because the kidneys purify the blood. The kidneys purify the blood. Now the more blood you have, the more power you have. Or the healthier the blood, or the stronger the blood, the more power that you have. So as you begin to sift through the good and the bad things inside your innermost parts, then the stronger your walk is with God, depending on what you let go of and what you hang on to. Amen? There are 23 different things that you can look for to see if someone is lying to you. There's 23 different things you could look for on a person while they're talking to see if they're lying to you. Well, one thing is if they lose eye contact with you. If they lose eye contact with you, that is an indication that they may be lying to you. So there are 23 different things that you can look for to tell if somebody is lying to you. But you can't lie to God. You can't lie to God. Because as you go up to God, you say, "Well, God, I was thinking, well, you know, Lord." And even in your prayer time, as you begin to haggle with God, as you begin to haggle with the Spirit, God isn't even listening to your words. He's looking at the inside. He's looking at the innermost parts of you, where you've already made up your mind, and you've already made a decision, and you already have accepted to hold on to things or rejected to let things go. So you can say all you want and move all you want and all of these outward things, but God is really looking so deep inside of you that you don't even pray about it. You don't pray about this part of you so deep inside of you. Now it's the mind. Every time God talks about the mind, He is really talking about your kidneys. He's really talking about a place so deep inside of you that separates the good from the bad. Those are those thoughts, and those are those decisions, and those are those emotions. Those are the experiences that you refuse to let go of. See, you can't lie to God, and if you try to fake it with God, He will expose you, and He's giving you a chance. He's saying, "Let me give you a chance before you say anything. Let me tell you, I've already seen the tape. Before you say anything, let me tell you, I have a witness. Before you say anything, I want you to know." I remember one time we had a bunch of my friends, and we had all got arrested, and we were all, and they took each of us into a room there to talk with us, and the cop says, he says, "Before you say anything, let me tell you, your friends already told on you. Before you say anything, let me tell you, I already talked to your buddies, and they already told me the truth." And it was like, "Well, what do you need me here for then if you know the truth?" So God says, before you say anything, let me let you know. So that's the discipline. That's the point where God is in deep inside of you, and I'm trying to word it better. I'm really
really having a hard time wording it better, because, you know, with the kidneys, and I began to